Alright guys, welcome back to another week of me trying to be profitable and earn a payout. This week was pretty slow as there wasn't that many opportunities for me to capitalize on. There was quite a lot of news this week too, so I had to be careful, especially with certain ones that I may struggle with particularly. I did get plenty of practice to not rust up, and also did some analysis on the model and what I could do better, especially in times like these where the market may move a bit more sluggishly. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's get into this week's trades. Alright, so the high timer today seems to be traveling bullish currently, with us respecting this 4-hour and 1-hour order block. Though looking at price currently, we did seem to have very weak power and we were failing to sweep the highs. And looking at the low time frame, we were able to see the chop a lot more clearly, and I do see that we're respecting this 5-minute order block for bearish currently. Contradicting this, we do also have the 15-minute wick sweeping out this low, which does indicate bullish though, so I wanted to see something more clear. And for today, honestly, I didn't end up finding a setup, and price just ended up chopping around forever. I did see potential for a setup into a long, as it did have both the high timer and low timer alignments, as well as tapping the golden zone and having plenty of draws on liquidity to the buy side. I didn't end up taking this though, as price didn't get a candle body form above the high to signal a shift. That's a good change I reckon I made from before, as before if I saw the wicks from the golden zone plus the decent bullish candle form after that, I most likely would have entered, and this change primarily has helped us cut out all those trades that cause unnecessary losses. Alright, looking at the high time frame currently, we seem to be pretty bullish as we do have this 1-hour order block here. And we do have this high we could target, so I definitely want to consider for that. And on the low time frame, we had this 15-minute imbalance, which we're moving to retest currently, and we had tapped the 5-minute ranges discount zone, which personally indicates to me that we could move higher. And I do want to see a shift higher first though before going into a setup. Going into the setup, I had to wait a fat minute as this entry was around 12 AM. It was a A+ setup though, so I was pretty confident in the setup, and price was just being so slow, which is understandable as it was a lot later. I ended up entering extra contracts as we did retest down into this newly developed 5-minute order block, which we're still holding, which makes me even more confident. Though as time went on, I ended up just moving to break even as it was getting pretty late for me and I did have class tomorrow, so I just ended it there. There really isn't much else I have to say for today, probably just not taking a trade so late, as I do know that volume won't be present as often, and hopping in trades later will just lead to, me sleeping later. Coming into today, we did seem to be pretty bullish currently, as we had just retested and respected this new 4-hour order block. We had a massive wick sweep of the high impact news earlier, which swept out a lot of this outside draws. Looking at the low time frame, price seemed to be recovering pretty nicely from news, and we even inversed the 5-minute fair value gap, which I could perhaps look to see retested into. And going into the setup, we ended up retesting a 5-minute inverse fair value gap and 15-minute order block a bit later. We formed respecting these imbalances and got a 1-minute shift as a response, and I waited a bit more for confirmation though, as I didn't want to be faked out, and we did get the confirmation shortly after, which made me enter into the setup. And we were moving pretty slowly at first, though we did get a nice shift higher, which made me size in more contracts as I was confident having a more tighter stop now. And price ended up chopping for a while longer before finally pushing up to hit our break-even point where we move our stop. Price ended up pushing down though, hitting our break-even and ending our trade for today. And for today, honestly, I was pretty happy with the setup as it was A+. I could have entered earlier though from the 1-minute breaker formation, as the breaker form was also from a response to an imbalance retest, so this makes the breaker highly probable entry. I didn't end up taking it though, as I just was unconfident in these conditions, which I do need to fix. Also, what I would change is being more discretionary, especially with days like these, as volume really just wasn't there today. I wanted to take some profit out the prominent high as it was already later and it was unlikely for volume to come in and hit my TP, but I ended up deciding against it as I figured it would just be an emotional TP. And looking back now though, I can see now that it would have been the right choice, as market sentiment was just screaming weak power and a lack of ability to continue higher. So perhaps next time I should be more confident in my intuition, especially if price is being so clear. Alright, so today we seem to be pretty bullish as we did finally take out the all-time highs after a few days of chop, and we're also fresh off of respecting this 1-hour order block too, which makes me want to see price continue higher. Moving to the low time frame, we're continuing with that buying move as we're currently respecting a 15-minute order block. Currently do see a 5-minute wick, which is also one indication against longs, as the lack of power doesn't seem that great, but we'll wait to see how price looks closer to when we can trade. And going into the setup, price did end up getting a nice shift after accumulating for a while, but it just be what has the sales been coming a bit later recently. There's a nice shift to confirm this setup from the retest into the 15-minute order block, but price ended up also inversing a 5-minute fair value gap and holding above it, which added more to the bias. I was just overall leaning more towards longs today, as the high timer and low timer were aligned, as well as the bullish activity on the 15-minute. This trade was really slow as per usual, as we were already quite late into the session, at least for me, and we ended up continuing to accumulate further before I decided to trail my stop as it was getting pretty late. We also swept out the high on ES, which makes me decide to move to break even initially, and price ended up coming down to close us out for a small profit of 100. And for today, the setup was honestly really good. An overall A+ setup, with the only problem being the later entry time, meaning less volume. Price didn't end up hitting the target in the end, which does show perhaps I could leave my trade to play out longer. Though me taking the trade out early was also from yesterday's lesson, where I don't want to be too ambitious, especially within these markets with low volume. But yeah, overall still alright with today. The setup found was really good, and it was just a bit of a dry season right now, which is all good. Alright, so that about does it for this week. All good week this week, albeit a bit slow. Only took a few trades this week, but all of them were all A+ setups that were backed up with plenty of good balances. The only thing holding these trades back were either my lack of confidence to enter from the first shift, or the volume just dying out and stopping out at break even. That's right there, as I know that I can't win them all. It takes time for these lessons to sink in, and I'll use this weekend to help digest the lessons. A bit of a dry week overall, but yeah, I know these sectors do appear at times, and what's important is that I continue to grind and gain good wins in other aspects of my life. If I can do that and maintain confidence, then I'll for sure be able to do well when market picks up again. But yeah, otherwise that's about it for this week. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.